is very special because it happened right, all the subject matter, everything happened right here in Boca Raton. You know, all associated with World War II, which is our major exhibit, as you can see in this room. And just as a reminder, this exhibit ends at the end of next week. But we do have one more talk, and this is next Thursday, May 16th. Dr. Peter Barrett, who was a 10-year-old boy on the beach at Boca Raton during World War II, is coming in to talk about his experiences. This guy's 92 years old, but he remembers everything. And he's given us a lot of his artifacts. You see them in our display cases. He had children's toys, models of the planes, cards, all kinds of things. And the little coffee can we have in the World War II exhibit that came ashore from a merchant marine ship, well, that was his. So anyway, he's going to have lots of stories for us next week. So that's May 16th, 6 o'clock, the same type of thing we're doing tonight. And then after the World War II exhibit comes down, we're going for a month, have an exhibit commemorating the 50th anniversary of Boca Raton's Beach and Park District. So that's sort of what's coming up here, and we hope you will stay engaged with us. And I want to remind you that we are a membership organization. We'd love to have you all as members. The membership cards are on the front desk. So now I'm going to introduce our curator, Susan Gillis, who's going to tell us about tonight.
Well, thank you all for coming. What a good crowd here. These are all over the place around town. This is an article about our World War II in Florida exhibit, but also an interview with Dr. Barrett. Please feel free to take one. We have oodles of them. But let's get on to, the other one thing I want to mention is in our museum store, we have a number of very good publications on the topic of World War II, particularly in Florida, including Sally Lynn's book, Small Town Big Secrets. We have a new order coming in probably tomorrow, right? But several books, and we also have, I just want to point out my bling. Okay, this is the mascot of the Boca Raton Army Airfield. It's a pelican, and yes, that's radar coming out of his head. And we do have these little butt pins that show that it's sort of a popular thing with our little BRAAF mascot there. So tonight I want to introduce a lovely friend of ours, Tom Wood. We still call him Chief Wood.
Sure.
Tom was with Boca Raton Fire Rescue for 47 and a half years, retired in 2021. He holds a Master of Science in Executive Fire Service Leadership from Grand Canyon University and has some wonderful awards. I want to mention some of these. 3 outstanding research awards from the National Fire Academy, Executive Fire Officer Program in 92, 93, and 95. The Fire Marshal of the Year Award from the state of Florida in 1996. The Fellowship for Senior Executives in State and Local Government in 2000 at Harvard. One of 8 contributing authors to Pass It On, the Second Alarm, published in April 2016. And he completed the Homeland Security Executive Leaders Program at the Center for Homeland Defense and Security at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California in 2017. He maintains 2 professional designations, CFO, Chief Fire Officer, and FIFireE. I'm sure there's a way to say that. The Fellow Institution of Fire Engineers. The Fellow designation is only held by about 1% of the 11,000 members worldwide, so that's very impressive. Tom served 5 years as Secretary of the Institution of Fire Engineers, USA branch. Tom is a wonderful researcher, historical researcher, so that's Tom's secret side, is his historian side. So I'm going to let him tell you about a really fascinating incident and time in our local history. Chief Wood.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Mary, for the introductions. Again, my name is Tom Wood. If you need to reach out, it's just Tom. There's a bunch of honored guests here, but I'm going to wait till we get to where they are in the program to give them the shout out. So what I'm going to do first, though, is The room that you passed in the hallway here that's dedicated to World War II and the Boca Raton Army Airfield, that'll still be here after this one closes. So if you missed it or you want to come back and see that room again, it'll still be here. The name of this program is Boca Raton Army Airfield Base Fire Department, and you'll see there's two different years. There's the 42 to 47, and then 47 to 59, and when I get into that, you'll understand the difference there. Sally Ling was mentioned earlier, and I brought her two books here. She was one of my inspirations for this research early on. She wrote the first one in 2005 and the second edition in 2012. And if you haven't seen them yet, it's well worth obtaining and reading. And really enjoyed it, and quite an inspiration to look closer at what I was interested in with this. But my research was original research. I obtained from the Air Force Historical Research Agency at Maxwell Air Force Base, 11,000 pages of base documents that had formerly been on microfilm, but by the time I was able to do it, it was on a disk drive. So I went through every single 11,000 pages looking for golden nuggets on my specific topics, mostly the fire department at that time. And that's when I came across this most significant crash, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. I also obtained the accident report, 32 pages on that crash from May 12th of 1944. And the State of Florida Bureau of Statistics for the death certificates on the 9 soldiers. And other research done here with the files at the Boca Raton Historical Society. There were a total of 6 fire stations at the Boca Raton Army Airfield. The top list there, the 5, 6, there's actually 6 listed there. One's an ambulance area, but they were all built with wood frame. And they didn't hold up real well in an event in 1947 that eventually closed the base. The buildings that were built of concrete and concrete blocks survived, including the 2 crash fire rescue stations. They were still there at the end of that. And you see a picture of one of the stations down below. The map is there. The map is also over here. It is, I can't use the pointer on here because it reflects off the screen, but the stations along the main north-south runway, you have a fire station there, and that is the ambulance shed. This is where the crash occurred in May of 1944. And then you'll see the other red dots are the other fire stations. And over here near this dot is the base hospital. That was all the area from Palmetto Park Road to about Yamada Road. The Seaboard Railroad is running right here. And then on the far side is Dixie Highway and the FEC tracks. Little cutouts over here for Old Floresta and for where City Hall stands today. Where City Hall stands today used to be the city water plant. And they carved that out of the base so that the city could still maintain the water plant because the base used that for their water. Some more of the fire stations. The one in the upper left corner there is the main fire station. That was located on 4th Avenue north of Palmetto Park Road, if you're familiar with that location. The bottom right corner is what the fire station looked like after the 1947 hurricane. The trucks were still there, but the wood frame building blew away. I want to talk a little bit about the fire chief and his staff. Lonnie Cook Sr. was the fire chief. We have some of his family members here today. His daughter-in-law, Mary Ellen Cook, is sitting over here. Raise your hand. And her daughter over here is Connie Cook Lyons. They were very instrumental, and Lonnie Cook Sr. and Lonnie Cook Jr. were both very instrumental in getting the Delray Beach Historical Society, the Delray version of this, off the ground. And in my original research back in 2014, I visited the Delray Beach Historical Society because they had the Delray Beach News longer than we had the Boca Raton News. And there were many articles that I cited and had to find in the archives at the Delray Beach Historical Society to complete the study. And so thank you very much, ladies, for being here. Also, I met with Mary Ellen in 2014, and you'll see in a moment, you'll see some badges. But let me just talk a little bit about Lonnie real quick. He was a World War I Purple Heart recipient. So he fought in World War I. He then became a volunteer fireman at Delray Beach and then became their first career chief in Delray Beach. But the Air Force came along and stole him away, or I'm sorry, the Army Air Corps stole him away. And starting in June of 42 to 48, he was the base fire chief. Then he went off somewhere else, and then he came back again between 48 and 49. And he went somewhere else, and then he came back between 53 and 59. So he was back and forth between the Army Airfield and his other adventures. He wound up being up at Dobbins Air Force Base as fire chief. He was a district vice president of the Florida State Firemen's Association, instructor, published articles, and he died at 93 years old in 1992. But a great life, and these are his many badges. It's hard to see in some of those pictures. Some of them say Boca Raton Army Airfield, some say U.S. Air Force. There was a change in 47 where it went from Army Air Corps to Air Force. And thank you for sharing those with me so I could get them in this program. And all the history, the big pile of stuff I got to go through to get all that information. The banned day room fire was one of the things I found in the May 19th of 44. You see the firefighters didn't have a lot of protective clothing back then. Today we're in about 50 pounds of gear, including an air bottle and Nomex hoods, and you name it, we've got it to protect ourselves. But back then, wasn't a lot of that. And the building kind of burned up, but they did the best they could to put it out. Between 1942 and 1947, there were a total of 49 military aircraft crashes at the base. And this is just a picture of one of them. Many of them, like this one, probably was the wheels didn't extend down or something upon landing. And many of them may have had minor injuries or slight injuries, but nothing serious. The B34 crash of May 12, 1944 will be covered in detail in part 2, which I'll get to in a few minutes. A little thing called the Fort Lauderdale hurricane struck the base in 1947, came right in, direct hit, and it devastated the base. Another little thing happened in 1947 was that the U.S. Army Air Corps became the United States Air Force September 18th of 47. And the Boca Raton Army Airfield became the Boca Raton Air Force Auxiliary Airfield. And it was part of a squadron, and I'm still trying to verify that because I have the Installation Squadron Detachment 1, which I found in some places, and then I found another reference to a different squadron in another place. I've currently got a request into the Air Force to figure out which one's right. While the Air Base Fire Department remained active for all the years when the base was downsized, this was the size of the base, that almost 9 square mile area, 5,800 acres. It was pared down to 1,000 acres in 47 after the base closed, after most of the buildings were blown down. Instead of rebuilding them, they closed the base, except for the 1,000 square feet around what today is FAU and the airport. 200 acres became the airport, and the 800 acres became Florida Atlantic University. The fire department was the last to leave the old base in June of 1959. This was a plaque that we have at the Boca Raton Fire Department commemorating the use of the truck that was donated to the city in 1947. And it became the second most popular truck on the department at that time. It left the department the same year I was hired. Probably a few months before I walked in the door in June, it had just left. But it was, for 27 years, it was one of the mainstays for the fire department. You can see pictures here with old Betsy and a chief's car at this building. The buildings you see here on the left and all, that is Town Hall back in the day. And on the far right-hand corner, that's the fire at the San Remo Condos Villa Verona in 1967. Old Betsy is the fire truck in the closer view, and just beyond it is a 1947 Perch truck that was pumping water. And the other engine that Boca Raton had at the time was an American LaFrance open cab. It's down by the water. The problem they had that day is their ladders didn't reach the roof. And it was a man trapped on the roof. And they were finally able to get them off by some miracle. They got them off there, saved them, and got the fire out. That's when the building was under construction, for anybody that knows where A1A is and the San Remo apartments. The 1947 engine was found in 2018. I think a lot to do with Neil Duffy, one of the firefighters that located it, got it, bought it, and had it delivered back to Boca Raton with full hopes of a full restoration. Unfortunately, it still looks like that. It's been here, going on, 7 years and 6 years, and nothing's been done yet. They were looking to raise money to restore it, but that hasn't happened yet. There were a number of other incidents at the base after the main part of the base closed, and it was just 1,000 acres, including this one. In August 8th of 1956, there was a crash of a C-82 cargo plane. And this is an article from the Boca Raton News of August 10th. And you see a photo of it. It's upside down, and which you can't see too well in that picture, but I can try to point out to you. This is the Seaboard Railroad tracks right here. You can see the railroads here and the tie beams. The plane, I can show you on this one here. This is the runway that plane was trying to come in on. It was making a trip from Miami, and it came this way, tried to land here, and then it made a go around. It couldn't make a landing, and it crashed right here by the railroad tracks. Somewhere very close to the swale of I-95 where you see the railroad tracks today. It's, on the other picture, it's easier to see those are railroad tracks, believe it or not. This is a second article about it, and in this they're praising the city firefighters for helping to come and help the base firefighters put the fire out and recover what they could. So this was from August 17th. It was manufactured in 1944 during the war. It was a war surplus. It had a nickname called the Flying Boxcar. The state of Florida was contracting this company to use it for aerial spraying for the Mediterranean fruit fly. And the plan was to get here early in the morning, fly over the city, and spray the whole city. Wasn't that fun? They don't do that anymore. They lost left engine power on that approach to landing and tried to perform a go-around, didn't have enough power, and it crashed. There were no pesticides on board the plane. They were to load the pesticides when they reached Boca Raton. They had left Masters Field in Miami to come up. They had arrived here around 5 a.m. and the crash occurred at 5:05. There were no lights on the runway, but they say they could see it. But that might have been part of the problem also, because maybe they were misaligned and that's why they tried to perform a go-around. They claimed there was enough pre-dawn light to see them. There were no communications with the two aircraft. There were two planes that flew up together, and they both had radios that worked, but apparently the crew that was having this difficulty never radioed the other crew and said, hey, we're going down, or we have engine trouble. But witnesses on the ground said the motors were sputtering when they flew low overhead, heading for the airport. So they apparently had some kind of mechanical problem, but did not radio it to the other unit, didn't go call a mayday or anything, and they just crashed. And again, this is showing the location of the two crash fire stations and then the 1956 crash, the estimated area where it was. All 5 crew members on board that plane died. The 2 pilots were from Hayward, California, which was the base of operation for that company. And the people actually conducting the spraying were out of Miami, the crew members. I was able to locate the Civil Aeronautics Board report released in May 5th of 1957. It's a 7-page report, and it was very detailed. Going on now from that point, the Air Base Fire Department enjoyed great cooperation with the City Fire Department. In fact, they got together in December of 1956, and this newspaper article described the exchange of information between the city crew and the Air Base crew. And you got to realize too that back then they had 17 full-time employees at the Air Base and probably working 2 shifts, or maybe one shift, I don't know. But the city had 1 chief and maybe 1 other paid person. We had volunteers and they had career people. Then there's the Sterling Furniture Store fire in 1958, and this one talks about how the base firefighters came to the city to help save the day for them. And I'm not getting into all the details of that one, but it's just the good cooperation between the two departments. There's a quitclaim deed executed on April 24th of 1959, which would then give that land, the federal land, to the state so that they could continue with the plans for a university. And these two articles came out about a month apart saying that the base, despite all the rumors, the base is staying open until June 1st. So apparently there were a lot of rumors going around, but the base apparently didn't close till June 1st. The last two fire stations were the two crash stations that I showed you just a few moments ago. The one at the south end, Station 2, served as the first office space for the FAU's first president, Dr. Kenneth Williams. And that structure was demolished in these early phases of the original FAU construction. The second one, Air Crash Fire Station number 1 on the north end, served as the storage for the FAU Ocean Engineering Department until the late 1990s when Palm Beach State College expanded its facilities and it was demolished. So up until like 1980, 1998, somewhere around that range. I think it's when they built the gymnasium out there is where that building came down. So what remains of the BRAAF today? I have one of 147 fire hydrants installed at the base and now installed next to my pool in my backyard. And if you look at the picture on the bottom left here, it says 1942. It should say 1992, not 1994, that's a mistake. But in 1992, when the hydrants were 50 years old, FAU decided to change them all out and update them. So all the 1942 hydrants were pulled out, they put new ones in, and I saw this pile of hydrants sitting there one day driving by, and I said, hey, what are you doing with those? And they said, we're throwing them away. And I said, can I have one? And they said, sure. So that hydrant sits in my backyard. Questions on part 1? Okay, moving along. B34 crash at the Boca Raton Army Airfield. This happened May 12, 1944. This is again the map, same map you saw before. And this is what it looked like in the early days of FAU. And the reason for this map now is to show you where the crash occurred. That green dot is 800 feet from the end of the runway and 200 feet north of the center point of the runway. That was in the 30-odd page report that came out on the crash. So those were the measurements, and the actual, in the 1960s, the aerial photographs still had all of the runways still in existence. Now when you go out there, they're very hard to find. The only one that you really could see is the one north of the stadium. All the others have been paved over with asphalt, so they're very hard to find. So here's where this map or aerial shot was shown in 2014. This is where it is diagonally across from the FAU Stadium. And here's a site comparison again showing. And so one of the points of reference I used was the Henderson School. Not the one that's there today, but the one that used to be there. If you've not been to FAU in a long time, the Henderson School has been torn down and rebuilt. So, but this is the old Henderson School that you see on the FAU property. I use that as a base of reference because it sat at the end of the runway. This was out of the base reports, that 11,000 pages that I was reading through. And it says, this month, or the month revealed the greatest loss of life and property in the annals of the fire department on the base since its inauguration. And I cite the section of, it was the quarterly report, or report from the 1st of May through June 30th, 2-month report on page 70. The specifics, it happened on May 12, 1944 at 8:17 a.m. The mission was routine radar training. The B-34 was taking off in an easterly direction from the west end of the east-west runway. And again, I can do this one over here. This is the east end of the east-west runway. This would be at like the south end of where the Boca Raton Airport is today. And I-95 is like right here. But it was stopped here and it was going in an easterly direction. This is where it crashed. Never made it to the end. It traveled 3,400 feet, only lifting off about 35 feet. The B-34 veered left and hit the ground, cartwheeling, came to rest upside down and on fire. These are actual firefighting pictures of that day. In the files, I was able to get this from, again, the U.S. Air Force. They had all these in their files. Plane is upside down. In the background, you can see the hangars. Those hangars are these buildings here. These are the hangars that you see in the background. The photo was taken in this direction. Again, you don't see any turnout clothing on the firefighters. These are the 9 soldiers that died that day. The pilot was William Carson, First Lieutenant Jacob Bowie, First Lieutenant Lamont, First Lieutenant Lomanak, First Lieutenant Sibley, Staff Sergeant Bursaw, Sergeant Safico, Private First Class Norman Steiner, and Private Robert Locke. And as you see, some of these were actual crew members of the aircraft. The pilot, the radar instructor, and the aerial engineer were all members of the crew. Most of the rest were trainees or people, students, Air Force or Air Corps people that were being trained on the use of the radar. And just to clarify again, ground radar had been around already, but this was actual radar installed in the aircraft so they could see the other planes in the area from the aircraft, inside the aircraft. And that was new technology brought to the States by the British to help us with the war. In preface, 19, COVID canceled our first ceremony, and the next few slides detailed what I learned from those family members. And I'm going to start out with the Bowie family, and they're all sitting up here. They came all the way from Central Florida, and I want to introduce them. When I say your name, raise your hand. Gail Brownsberger. Gail's been one of my primary contacts with the Bowie family, but when I first started calling, I actually was speaking with her grandmother, which was Bessie, and we'll talk about that again in a few minutes. And sitting next to her is Kenneth Woods, no relation. Kenneth? And then over here we have Nathaniel and I have to get my paper out. I'm so embarrassed. Donna and Nathaniel Taylor. And he's going to become a pilot. So he's in pilot training. Can't thank you enough for coming all the way down here for this today. 8 members of the crew died on impact, as evidenced by the death certificates listing it at 8:25 a.m. However, Jacob died at the BRAAF hospital at 2:20 p.m., 4 hours and 55 minutes later. That gave that family time to get from Central Florida to here to say their goodbyes before he passed. Can you imagine making the trip from Leesburg, Florida to here without the turnpike, without I-95, probably without most of the other major roads? US 1 existed, maybe 441, we're not sure. But there weren't many other roads. And to make that long trip to get here in time, but they did, they made it in time. January 2020, my detective work left to finding the first contact, Bessie Hoffman, which was Jacob's sister. She made that drive May 12th. Unfortunately, she died at 103 years old in July of 2020. So don't have her bring any stories anymore. This is Jacob and his mom, and then this photo was just taken today at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. We've got the family members out there by the marker. First Lieutenant William Carson, pilot. My early contact was with William's nephew, Lewis Carson. He explained the impact of the crash had on his grandmother, and he wrote, she was deeply affected, and part of the grieving process, she made a trip around the South and visited the family of each of the others on the plane to share in sorrow. Most recent contact has been with Kyle Carson, his nephew. These are the relation to the person that died. First Lieutenant John J. Lomanak. Most of the family contact's been through his great niece, Patty Manussi. She had plans to be here with some family members today, but unfortunately, about 3 days ago, she had to cancel out. Sergeant John E. Safeco. John's nephew, John Grakowski, has been my primary contact. I've had more contact with him than any other family member. We probably text and talk at least every 3 months. He provided newspaper articles about John's death from the Kenosha Evening News, and this is one of the things it had to say. Today, also, there came from a Mother's Day greeting card and a letter written May 9th telling how much he enjoyed his work as a sergeant in the Army Air Corps. So the plane crash, they'd already mailed out their Mother's Day cards, and the plane crash occurred right after that. But the cards have still arrived to the families. Private First Class Norman R. Steiner. In February of 23, I was contacted by LinkedIn messaging by Lexi Ehrman, great niece of Norman, and her brother Max Ehrman, great nephew. They were in Boca Raton at the historic marker with Sheldon Steiner, Norman's brother. Unfortunately, I read the message one day too late, and they'd already left the area. I didn't get a chance to get to see them out there. And all my contact, I haven't been able to get that photo. I think they took a photo at the marker, but I haven't been able to reach them to get it. Private Robert E. Locke, my primary contact was his nephew, Terry Locke, and he told me he was 10 when Robert died. Most recent contact has been silent, so I don't know if he's able to get those messages now. I was able to find gravestones for 7 of the soldiers, so I'm missing 2. There were 19 written witness statements from the crash, and that's how we came up with some of the numbers as far as the height of the crash and all those things, but it was a very detailed report. In the aftermath, all the wreckage was picked up and hauled away to a military base where they do these kinds of investigations. This was written in the Army Air Corps Accident Review Board findings of May 22nd, 1944, pretty quickly after, 10 days later. It is opinion of the board that the airplane serial number crashed due to a loss of power of the left engine shortly after takeoff at a critical time when successful single engine operation would be extremely difficult. The board alluded to a possible failure of the fuel pumps serving the left engine, and that 750 hours of operation could have been a factor. All the B-34s at the base were deactivated by October of 1944. They had been serving them well, but 4 Venture Marks, which was another name for the same aircraft, that were ordered by Mark IIs, ordered by the British Royal Air Force. But before they could be shipped overseas, the United States Army Air Corps seized them and decided to use them here in the States. They could be used as a submarine patrol bomber, and others were kept stateside for training, such as the radar training done at Boca Raton. This is just the specifications of the aircraft. It would typically have a crew of 6, so you thought, well, there's 9 people, but it didn't have all the bombs and all the other stuff, so it was well under the weight limit that it needed to be. A little sketch of the aircraft. This is my model. I have the model here at the desk if you want to take a look at it. My wife was going to kill me when I spent $300 to have this custom made. But it's custom painted with the tail number is the tail number of the plane that crashed. And this was how it was displayed in my office at Boca Raton Fire Rescue, which is now in my home office at home. Elliot Kleinberg made a presentation here to the Historical Society maybe 2 months ago about his stories about World War II in the Palm Beach County area. He was a reporter for the Palm Beach Post, and in 2014, when I first finished my research, he wrote this article in the Palm Beach Post about the plane crash. There's a link at the Boca Raton Historical Society website that you can go to find some of the documents. There's a gentleman called Charlie Schmidt who in 2015 created his own monument to the crash. He was doing an Eagle Scout project, and this exists over at the airport. It's right near the main entrance to the airport. That's Airport Road, you can see in the background. It was a long process, started in 2014, but we had success May 27th of 2021 when we finally got the historical marker placed at FAU. And that's President John Kelly and myself in my uniform. And President Kelly, where are you at? Right, there he is. Thank you for coming here today, sir. I never would have gotten to President Kelly if it wasn't for Howard Schwartz. Howard, where are you? There he is. I did this presentation at a Rotary Club meeting, and Howard, at the end of it, comes up to me and says, "You want to get a historical marketplace at FAU? I might know somebody." And sure enough, within 2 weeks, I had a phone call from President Kelly's secretary trying to set an appointment for me. So thank you, Howard, and thank you, President Kelly. The finished product is in the frame over here if you want to get a closer look at it. One side is a descriptive of the events, the base itself, and then the events of the crash. The flip side is the names of the soldiers, their hometown, and their age, and their rank at the time of the crash. I was going to say something about the narrative. You're limited to 1,235 characters, I think, and not a character more. So you have to be really, really careful how you word things. And when I submitted it to the State Historical Marker Council, the only thing that really they didn't like was there was one sentence that wasn't chronologically in sequence. And they just moved it from one point to one point. I said, "Yeah, I'm happy with that." And then they gave it the blessing. So it really was, after listening, I was like number 10 in the agenda. And having seen them beat up all these other people, I said, "Yeah, that's great." But this is the day that we unveiled the marker. Upper left corner, you see Susan Gillis, and then also Dan Flynn standing next to President Kelly. And Dan's here today in the back. Dan, say hi. And the other photo on the upper right there, you've got some of our city council members, and then we have, in addition to that, Mary Czar and Susan Gillis. Thank you, ladies. Where are you at? Here somewhere in the back. Larry Irvin is the gentleman in the police uniform standing next to me. He sang the national anthem for us. He's got a great voice. And then a family shot in the lower right-hand corner with President Kelly. So that was nice. Nice day. Other Vice President Flynn, Vice President Peter Hull, Vice President Stacy Volnick, all these people helped me get this organized. The public relations guy, Luis Perez, was the grunt guy that really put it all together, I think. He couldn't be here tonight, but he really did a great job. Maintenance Supervisor John Nicolosi, who's the guy that actually put it in the ground for us. Captain Irvin, I mentioned here Susan Gillis, author Sally Ling, and then the U.S. Air Force Historical Research Agency staff, which really went above and beyond. Hopefully they do it again for me, because I've got another request into them. Thank you to all the surviving family members. This is a list of them. Hard to read from where you're at, but it's the family members I've been able to contact. And the most important person to thank, my wife. We still look like that. That was August 16th, 1975. We've been together coming up on 49 years. So I just want to point out thanks to my wife who's sitting here, my son Michael, my daughter-in-law Mariana, my wife's brother Jim, and his wife Trish. So thank you for coming, guys. First Yelp review. Did you know we had a Yelp review? I didn't know. Ariel W. Is Ariel here? I invited her. Okay, she wrote this review. I didn't see it till almost 10 months later because I wasn't looking for it. Somehow I stumbled across it. She had one mistake in there, and I corrected it, which you see in this thing. I made a correction to the Yelp review. What else is happening? I did an article in September 2023 about the Army Airfield and the base fire department, and that was published September 23. May of 24, this month, there should be an article coming out about the crash, the B34 crash. The Florida Fire Chiefs Association and their magazine are kind of a little late getting things done, so maybe by the end of the month it'll be ready. So what's next? I've contacted the guys at Maxwell Air Force Base for the Boca Raton Air Force Auxiliary Field information from December of 48 through June of 1959. Asked for the reports and photos. They say take 2 to 3 months to get them. I hope it doesn't take that long. I hope to update the fire department section of this presentation with the 11 years that it was just the auxiliary field that remained open. And maybe in 5 or 10 years, I'll be invited back to make another presentation. I'll have some more new material to give you. But I hope to be back sooner. The 100th birthday of Old Betsy is coming up in 2025 and 2026. I've already started on a PowerPoint for that. It's Boca Raton Fire Engine 1, also called Old Betsy. It was built in 1925. This is the factory photo issued in 1926, just before it was delivered here to Boca Raton. The title of the program is The First 100 Years. So I'm working on that, and it's exciting. The program's pretty close to being done, actually. We may be making it at what's called the Florida Antique Bucket Brigade Conference coming up in the end of the year. Thank you, and questions? Any questions?
I do have, perhaps you could tell where Old Betsy is located now. Because she used to be very visible.
Oh, okay. Old Betsy is located at Fire Station number 3, which is at Palmetto Park Road in A1A, and it is on the National Registry of Historic Places. So we have to keep it in one spot, and it's covered with a tarp, but it's removed when we need to. Any other questions? Yes?
So Old Betsy is the one from the 20s. There's another engine from 47?
Yes.
You're looking through, that's a separate engine.
Yes, it is.
Where is that?
It's out at Fire Support. That's off Banyan Trail, off Military Trail. There's about 8 acres of land out there that the fire department uses to maintain apparatus and do training out there.
Is that also under a tarp?
No, sir. It hasn't been renovated or restored yet. It needs to be. I think the estimates were in the $80,000 range, and nobody's come up with the money yet. Yes?
Do you know, or how do you suppose Old Betsy got her name?
I don't know the answer to that, and everybody I've asked has not come up with a good answer. I did a generic lookup for Old Betsy, and apparently one of Davy Crockett's rifles was called Old Betsy. And then also, any machine that was very reliable apparently got that nickname back in the turn of the century. I guess some of the automotive cars coming off the production line weren't so reliable, but the ones that were called Old Betsy's. So maybe that's it. I don't know. Susan, do you know?
A lot of towns, local towns here have American LaFrance at the same era called Old Betsy. So Venice, Florida has an Old Betsy. Somewhere in the depths of our Facebook post from like a decade ago. So I thought that was, so apparently that was real common then.
Yeah. Well, yes, Kenny.
Tell them what happened to Old Betsy during the hurricane.
Yes.
We move Old Betsy up to Fire Support and park it inside so that it will not be on the beach. If the Station 3 has a breakaway wall on the back of it, so that if a tidal surge comes and it breaks out the back wall, it washes everything out the front doors. Even if the doors are down, they break away. So we don't want Old Betsy floating away. But one other interesting hurricane story is that in 1992, while it was being refurbished, it was in Florida City during Hurricane Andrew. Yeah, and it survived. Yes?
So all the soldiers that perished in the crash, the young men, they were all drafted, correct?
I don't know if they enlisted or drafted. I really don't know. Do you know if Jacob enlisted? We don't know. He did? He enlisted.
Most of the greatest generation did enlist. Right after Pearl Harbor.
The C-82, was it, that crashed in the 50s, right? You talk about Earth.
Yes.
Were those soldiers on board, military or civilians?
It crashed on the base.
Correct.
And the crash stations were occupied and they responded first. They called the city to assist them.
I see. But it wasn't like a military operation?
No. There were military craft doing touch and goes and military aircraft coming and going, but this was a contract from the state of Florida, I believe Department of Agriculture, that hired this private company that was in California but based in Miami with their aircraft that were actually conducting the aerial spraying. So all the people on board worked for that company that was based in California.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming.